Maplewood Meadows was exactly the kind of place I had long dreamed of calling home. Lush green lawns, charming houses trimmed with picket fences, and broad sidewalks perfect for evening strolls. Nestled in a peaceful suburb near rolling farmland, the neighborhood exuded calm and security. Vibrant maple trees flanked each street, their leaves ablaze with color each autumn. That calm was a welcome respite for me. I am Dr. Juliet Harrison, a certified nurse midwife and, as of a few months ago, the newly appointed head of the State Midwifery Board. While my professional life is typically split between consulting on state policies, championing best practices for midwives, and occasionally assisting at births, I was eager for this new neighborhood to provide stability and community in my private life. Maplewood Meadows seemed like an excellent choice, scenic, friendly, with an active homeowners association, but HOAs rarely bothered me, as I kept to the rules and minded my own business. I was soon introduced to a tapestry of fascinating neighbors, an elderly couple who cultivated roses, a single mom enthusiastic about backyard horticulture, a large family whose teenagers played basketball in the driveway. Most were welcoming, offering cookies or kind words as I settled in. However, during these conversations, a name popped up repeatedly spoken in hushed, uneasy tones. Watch out for Ms. Charlotte Ambrose, but everyone calls her Karen behind her back. She can be intense. I laughed it off at first, imagining typical busybody behavior, reminding people of grass height limits or mailbox colors. But the more folks warned me, the more I sensed her presence looming. She runs the HOA with an iron fist, a neighbor confided, and she can make life miserable if you cross her. I took that advice politely, still hoping that rumors outpaced reality. After all, how bad could an HOA president be? As it turned out, Ms. Ambrose Karen was more than a micromanager. She had found a new crusade that threatened not just me personally, but also the rights and well-being of families in the entire neighborhood. It wasn't long before I met Karen face to face. One sunny Saturday, I was kneeling in my front yard, planting lavender bushes by the porch. A shadow fell over me. I turned to see a woman in her early 50s, tall and angular, with meticulously coiffed hair and a stern expression. She wore a crisp blouse, pressed slacks, and clutched a binder labeled Maplewood Meadows HOA. "Hello," she said, tilting her head in stiff politeness. "You must be Dr. Harrison. I'm Miss Charlotte Ambrose, president of the Maplewood Meadows Homeowners Association." She said it like a law enforcement title. I got to my feet and offered a friendly smile. "Yes, that's me. Nice to meet you, Miss Ambrose." Her lips barely moved in response. "Likewise. I've heard you're new here, so let me extend a formal welcome. You should have received our HOA rules and guidelines. I do hope you'll follow them carefully." I wiped the soil from my hands. "Of course. I've gone through the booklet. Seems straightforward enough. Keep things looking neat, no loud parties, that sort of thing." She nodded, gaze flicking to my half-planted lavender. "Yes. We do allow purple flowers in front yards, but kindly ensure their growth won't exceed the height limit or spread uncontrollably. We take uniformity seriously." I resisted a bemused smile. "I'll keep them tidy." She tapped her binder. "Excellent. If you have any questions, you can contact me or any board member. We meet monthly at the clubhouse. Attendance is recommended." Her eyes lingered as though expecting a misstep. I simply thanked her. She gave a curt nod, pivoted, and walked off. Nothing about that exchange pointed to the storm on the horizon, but the controlling energy in her voice, the suspicious air, felt like a sign. A few days later, I heard from a neighbor that Karen had inquired about my occupation. She asked if you bring medical equipment into the neighborhood, or if you plan to run a clinic from your house. I found that odd, though not alarming. HOAs typically limit commercial activities from residences. I had no intention of turning my living room into a medical office. If Karen's main concern was potential code violations, fine. I had no issues with that. But soon, the real conflict emerged, revealing a far more personal and intrusive campaign than just policing a few rules about gardening or home businesses. As the months went by, a few local families reached out to me after learning I was a midwife. Some were pregnant, exploring their birthing options. Others had general questions about the benefits of midwifery. While I rarely practiced in-home births personally anymore, my board duties took up most of my time. I offered them advice, resources, and references. In Maplewood Meadows, interest in home birth or midwife-assisted births had surged in recent years. The city hospital was reputable, but some families preferred an intimate experience at home. Legally, families had every right to plan home births under licensed midwives. Our state had supportive laws and a strong professional community. But then I started hearing an unsettling rumor. The HOA was drafting new rules that would prohibit home birthing practices within the Maplewood Meadows boundaries. The explanation, as overheard in passing, was that Karen believed births could be disruptive, unsanitary, or dangerous. It was so ludicrous that at first, I dismissed it as a misunderstanding. No HOA had the authority to ban a medically legal, private event inside someone's personal residence. Then a pregnant neighbor, Andrea, showed up at my door in tears. Karen told me if I dare to have a home birth, she'll find me and petition the city to condemn my house as unfit. Andrea was only 6 months pregnant, planning a calm home birth with a certified midwife. She was terrified. My jaw clenched. That's outrageous. She can't legally do that. Andrea looked anguished. She says the HOA's new rule is nearly finalized. She claims it's for the health and safety of the neighborhood, that no one wants to hear screaming or risk medical complications on their street. She threatened me in front of some other residents, saying if I insisted on home birth, the HOA would come after me with fines and liens. I reassured Andrea, that's baseless. I can help you navigate your rights. The city and state definitely allow midwife-attended home births. I didn't yet reveal my position on the State Midwifery Board, but I vowed to intervene. A creeping anger took root. Karen had crossed a line. Over the next week, I learned from multiple sources that Karen was indeed pushing an official HOA bylaw amendment titled something like Residential Birth Safety Regulation. The draft contained language forbidding planned parturition outside accredited medical facilities in Maplewood Meadows. Violators could face daily fines or forced compliance actions. It was so absurd, so wildly outside the HOA's legitimate purview, that I initially believed it wouldn't pass muster. However, Karen was a master manipulator. She whipped up fear among some neighbors with stories of unsterile conditions, crying newborns, and the possibility of liability lawsuits if something went wrong. Many residents, ignorant about midwifery laws, got spooked. I realized it was time to stand up for these families and to remind Ms. Ambrose that no HOA, no matter how controlling, could override state law. She just didn't know she was squaring off against the head of the State Midwifery Board. I decided my first step would be to talk sense into Karen. Perhaps she genuinely misunderstood midwifery or was misled about what HOAs could do. So one afternoon, I approached her house, a pristine two-story with symmetrical landscaping. The yard was as rigidly neat as I expected. Karen answered the door, suspicious. "Dr. Harrison," she greeted coolly. "What brings you here unannounced?" I smiled gently. "Hello, Ms. Ambrose. I wanted to discuss the new bylaw you're proposing about banning home births. Is there a good time to talk?" She stepped outside, shutting the door behind her as though to keep me from glimpsing her domain. "I suppose now is fine, but make it brief. I'm quite busy." I inhaled slowly. "I've heard from concerned neighbors that you intend to forbid home birth. I'm sure you're aware that in our state, licensed midwives are permitted to attend births at home. Families have a legal right to choose that." She pressed her lips together. "HOA guidelines can supplement local laws if it concerns community standards and safety. Our official stance is that home birth is too risky. Emergencies could bring ambulance sirens, commotion, and potential harm to the mother and baby. We want births to happen in proper medical facilities." I fought to keep my tone even. With respect, that's not the HOA's call to make. The families who choose home birth typically plan with a qualified midwife, have medical clearance, and keep contingency plans for hospital transfer if needed. Home births rarely cause a public disturbance, certainly not to the extent of violating neighbors' peace. She sniffed. "I disagree. We have numerous families who feel uneasy about it. They worry about liability if something goes wrong. And personally, I believe it's irresponsible. Maplewood Meadows should uphold higher standards." I shook my head. "Karen, you're stepping into private healthcare decisions. The HOA has no legal standing to ban a recognized birth practice. If you attempt to enforce this, you'll face legal challenges." She folded her arms. "We'll see. The board is behind me. This measure will pass a neighborhood vote soon, and we'll enforce it like any other rule. If people don't like it, they can move or deliver their babies at the hospital. End of story." Her arrogance bristled through me. "I strongly advise you to consult with an attorney or look up state regulations. You're risking severe repercussions by interfering in medical rights." She gave a tight-lipped smirk. "I have, and we're confident in our approach. This conversation is over, Dr. Harrison. Goodbye." She turned and walked into her house, slamming the door. Fuming, I realized reason wouldn't work. Karen's posture, her unwavering belief in her own authority, spelled out a confrontation. She had no clue about my position on the State Midwifery Board. If she refused to heed my warning, the next steps would be more formal and far less cordial. Determined to help families threatened by the proposed ban, I spread the word. Through a private neighborhood social media group, I explained that an HOA bylaw could not override state law regarding medical choices in one's own home, especially a right as fundamental as childbirth choice. I wrote a lengthy post outlining state legal framework that clearly protected home birth under licensed midwifery, common myths about noise, safety, or liability, the fact that the Maplewood Meadows HOA had no legitimate grounds to ban an entirely legal practice behind closed doors. I didn't publicly declare my role as the board's chair yet, preferring to see if logic alone would sway people. The post garnered dozens of supportive comments from pregnant women, mothers, and open-minded neighbors. Some already disliked Karen's heavy-handed approach to other minor issues. Others, while neutral on home birth, agreed that this was an overreach. But soon, Karen's supporters struck back. They posted dire warnings about blood in the streets, ambulances clogging roads, and other wildly exaggerated claims. It devolved into a heated debate. The swirl of rumor and fear was classic Karen manipulation. At that point, Andrea, the mother who first came to me, privately messaged me, saying she felt harassed by the HOA. She'd received a written notice about imminent bylaw changes and penalties up to $500 per day if she proceeded with a midwife for her due date in 4 months. She was distraught, unsure if she should start looking for temporary housing outside Maplewood Meadows. I assured her that the HOA's threats were bluffing, but the stress was real. Families shouldn't have to endure intimidation from a local busybody just to exercise their legal healthcare choice. It was time to escalate. One tool I had was my official role. Typically, I didn't flaunt my position as chair of the State Midwifery Board. I preferred that my neighbors see me as an ordinary person. But now the stakes demanded it. I prepared a detailed letter on the board's letterhead, explaining that any attempt to ban a lawful healthcare practice was unenforceable and subject to potential legal penalty. I carefully cited relevant statutes, licensing guidelines, and recent precedents. Then, I emailed this letter to the entire HOA board, CC&G Karen. I also forwarded it to my local council representative so the city officials knew what was happening. The letter ended with a firm, formal statement. Should the Maplewood Meadows HOA adopt or enforce any bylaw that contravenes state-authorized midwifery or home birth practices, the HOA and its individual enforcers may be liable for legal action. As chair of the State Midwifery Board, I am prepared to protect the rights of families seeking home birth care under licensed professionals. The immediate response was shock. Several board members were caught off guard. They had assumed I was just a random neighbor who happened to be a midwife. Now they realized I had direct oversight and influence at the state level. One board member, a friendlier face named Cynthia, privately thanked me. I had no idea Ms. Ambrose was pushing such a reckless policy. I never would have supported it if I knew it was illegal. Karen, however, doubled down. In a mass email to residents, she claimed my letter was an attempt to bully the HOA with state connections. She insisted that the board had every right to regulate such matters for the common good. She scheduled a special HOA meeting to finalize the bylaw. The fiasco was about to go public and escalate drastically. The special meeting took place on a weekday evening at the Maplewood Meadows Clubhouse, a modest building with a large meeting hall. The place was packed. Residents rarely turned out in such numbers. Clearly, the tension was high. On one side, pregnant families and supporters of birth choice. On the other, Karen's loyal defenders, convinced that home birth posed a threat to their suburban utopia. I arrived early, took a seat near the front. My letter to the HOA had circulated widely. So many recognized me and murmured supportive greetings. Karen strode in with her trademark binder, flanked by 2 board members who either believed in her cause or were too intimidated to oppose her. She called the meeting to order with a loud rap of her gavel. This special session addresses the newly proposed Bylaw 17.9 regarding the prohibition of home birth or any midwife-assisted birth on neighborhood property. We will present our rationale, then open the floor to comments. The tension in the room grew thick as she clicked a remote, displaying a slideshow on a projector. She launched into a dramatic monologue about risks to neighbors, excessive noise, insurance liability, and preventing negative influences. The language was alarmist to the extreme, painting a picture of Maplewood Meadows overrun by frantic midwives and wailing mothers. I glanced around, noting how some residents appeared unconvinced, exchanging exasperated looks. Others nodded anxiously, buying Karen's fear-mongering. Finally, she invited statements from the audience. Andrea rose to her feet, voice quavering. "I'm 8 months pregnant now. My midwife is licensed, and we've planned a safe, gentle birth at my home. This new rule would penalize me for exercising a legal right. My husband and I pay our HOA dues, follow the rules. We've done nothing wrong. Why is it the HOA's business how I deliver my baby?" Karen gave a patronizing smile. "I understand your predicament, dear, but the majority must consider the broader community's welfare. You could always choose a hospital or birth center, correct? That's not too much to ask for maintaining harmony." Andrea's lip trembled. She sat down, tears in her eyes. Another mother spoke up, then a father whose wife was pregnant, each denouncing the intrusion. Karen listened with tight-lipped disapproval. When it was my turn, I stood and approached the microphone, my heart pounding. "I am Dr. Juliet Harrison, a certified nurse midwife, and more importantly, I am the chair of the State Midwifery Board. I can tell you unequivocally that your proposed bylaw is unlawful. It violates state statutes that protect families' rights to choose a licensed midwifery birth at home. The HOA has no jurisdiction to ban what is recognized as safe, legal health care in private residences." A wave of murmurs swept the crowd. Karen's face tightened. "We have the right to regulate potentially disruptive activities in Maplewood Meadows," she insisted. "That includes births that might cause noise disturbances or require emergency vehicles." I calmly countered. "Emergency vehicles might come for any household incident. Heart attacks, accidents, you name it. By that logic, are you banning all potential emergencies? This is an overreach. If you push this bylaw through and try enforcing it, you will face serious legal consequences from the state. The Midwifery Board stands ready to defend these families." Karen spat. "You can't bully us. The HOA majority stands with me. Let them vote." She forced a show of hands vote among the residents, though many felt intimidated. The result was inconclusive, with a chunk of the room voting yes on her ban, many voting no, and some abstaining out of fear. Karen declared the majority was in favor, a questionable count, saying, "The motion passes." Gasps and anger flared through the audience. A few pregnant mothers wept. Supporters shouted protest. Karen banged the gavel, shouting that the session was over and that bylaw 17.9 was now in effect. My stomach churned at her brazen disregard for legal warnings. She had set Maplewood Meadows on a collision course with the state. The next morning, I called an emergency session of the State Midwifery Board. My colleagues were appalled that an HOA was intruding on families' legal birth choices. We voted unanimously to issue a formal cease and desist letter to the Maplewood Meadows HOA, stating that any enforcement attempts would prompt immediate legal action for violating state regulations. We also notified the city attorney's office, as well as the county clerk responsible for official records of property restrictions. Karen, upon receiving this letter, escalated her vendetta. She directed the HOA to start distributing written notices to all pregnant residents who had indicated interest in home birth, informing them they would be fined $250 per day starting from 38 weeks of gestation if they failed to provide proof of hospital admission. It was an outrageous, wholly unenforceable scheme. But the intimidation factor was potent. Some families panicked, unsure how to proceed. Neighbors reported seeing Karen patrolling the neighborhood, stopping by houses with "Congratulations, it's a boy," or "It's a girl," lawn signs to warn them about violations. She seemed to relish the control. I likewise became a direct target. She emailed me violation notices for conducting medical consultations on HOA property whenever a neighbor visited my home to discuss midwifery issues. She threatened to file liens against my house, a move that had no basis in reality. It was pure harassment, but it added layers of stress to daily life. Local media got wind of the controversy. Maplewood Meadows HOA attempts to ban home birth. Sparks outrage, read one headline. Journalists interviewed pregnant families in tears, filmed tense standoffs at board gatherings. Public sentiment swiftly turned against Karen. Even so, she refused to back down, confident she could ride the wave of fear into total control. Little did she realize that the legal net was tightening. My colleagues at the Midwifery Board were in close contact with allied organizations ACOG, American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, Watchers, local women's rights groups, and civil liberty lawyers. A lawsuit was imminent if the HOA persisted. Behind the scenes, a few board members confided they were horrified by Karen's rampage. But she held such sway, threatening them with ouster or fines over petty code issues, that they remained silent. The seeds of her downfall were sown. She was about to learn how unstoppable a coalition of outraged mothers, dedicated midwives, and top-tier attorneys could be. Just when I thought Karen's intimidation couldn't get worse, the situation took a dramatic turn. A neighbor, Lily, was near her due date, planning a home birth with a licensed midwife. One night, Lily's husband found their mailbox stuffed with a large envelope. Inside was a typed note reading, "If you proceed with that baby stunt, Maplewood Meadows will have no choice but to forcibly enter your home and stop it. Stay in line or face eviction." This was more than harassment. It was a direct threat. Lily called me, terrified. Could they really do that? What if someone tries to break in while I'm in labor? My blood boiled. I assured her the police should be alerted immediately. She filed a report, and the police launched an investigation. The letter was anonymous, but everyone suspected Karen's involvement, or at least that of her extremist followers. Meanwhile, the upcoming lawsuit from the State Midwifery Board was nearing finalization. Our attorneys prepared an injunction to block the HOA's newly passed bylaw, citing it as unconstitutional under state law. The city attorney's office also weighed in, warning that Maplewood Meadows had zero authority to impose medical restrictions on private residences. In a last-ditch attempt to muster legitimacy, Karen staged a health and safety summit at the community clubhouse, inviting a couple of local paramedics she'd roped in with exaggerated claims about the hazards of home birth. But when the paramedics realized the event was aimed at scaring neighbors into compliance, they backpedaled, giving only generic safety advice. The evening ended in an embarrassing fiasco for Karen, with residents shouting questions about the latest mailbox threat. She offered no real answers, just deflection and blame. That same week, a local TV station covered Lily's story of receiving the terrifying letter. Public outrage soared. Protesters picketed near the Maplewood Meadows entrance, hoisting signs that read, "My birth, my choice, HOA tyranny ends here, and babies over bylaws." The broader community was paying attention, and pressure mounted on city officials to intervene. Karen was losing her grip. Yet she refused to relent, barricading herself behind the false claim that the majority wants no home births in Maplewood Meadows. She continued sending fine notices to pregnant families, ignoring the state's cease and desist. Little did she know, the next step from my side would be swift and decisive. The day arrived when the State Midwifery Board, in partnership with civil rights attorneys, filed a formal lawsuit seeking an injunction against Maplewood Meadows HOA. We alleged violation of state medical laws, infringement of privacy, harassment, and attempted extortion via unauthorized fines. We also demanded an immediate halt to enforcement of Bylaw 17.9. The city attorney's office joined as an amicus, supporting our stance. Word of the lawsuit sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. Many predicted Karen would back down, but she was too entrenched in her illusions of authority. She brazenly declared in an email blast that the HOA would stand firm. Some rumored that she had a secret legal fund from older residents who believed her scare stories. A hearing was set in the county courthouse to decide on the preliminary injunction. On the day of the hearing, families from Maplewood Meadows came en masse, pregnant mothers seated alongside attorneys, midwives, and supportive neighbors. The gallery was packed, the tension palpable. Karen arrived wearing a stiff suit, clutching her binder. She was accompanied by a single attorney, a man who looked visibly uncomfortable. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on her nose, listened carefully to both sides. Our attorneys outlined the state's midwifery laws, the family's personal testimonies of harassment, and the utter lack of HOA jurisdiction in private medical decisions. They showed evidence of threatening letters, the text of Bylaw 17.9, and official cease and desist documents Karen had ignored. Karen's attorney tried to argue the community's right to regulate any potential nuisance. He bungled references to noise ordinances, equating childbirth with disruptive parties. The judge wasn't impressed. Within an hour, the judge delivered a sharp rebuke. She granted the preliminary injunction, freezing the bylaw immediately. She also hinted that the HOA's fines and threats might constitute criminal harassment. In a scathing statement, the judge declared, No homeowners association may forbid a legally protected medical choice within private homes. Your bylaw is void and unenforceable from this moment on. Furthermore, those who have attempted to intimidate or extort families must cease all such actions or face additional legal consequences. Karen's face reddened. She argued back, ignoring her lawyer's attempts to calm her. The judge had had enough. She threatened Karen with contempt if she continued to speak out of turn. A hush fell in the courtroom. The ruling was crystal clear. Maplewood Meadows' ban on home birth was dead on arrival. Though the injunction destroyed Karen's precious bylaw, she refused to yield gracefully. She tried to rally the HOA board to appeal the judge's ruling. Most board members, however, wanted no part in further legal trouble. Several resigned immediately, ashamed they'd let Karen manipulate them. Others apologized publicly to the families they had scared. Meanwhile, the local police investigation into the threatening mailbox letter and other forms of harassment advanced. Forensic checks on typed notes, along with digital footprints from emails, traced back to a small group of Karen's staunch supporters. Some were indicted on charges of making terroristic threats. In recorded text messages, they implicated Karen as the ringleader who suggested we scare them good. That was the final blow. Police secured a warrant to search Karen's home for evidence linking her to intimidation campaigns. They found suspicious drafts of threatening letters, plus spreadsheets detailing fines she intended to collect from families who disobeyed the home birth ban. Her personal notes exposed her disdainful motivations: keep these reckless mothers in line. She also mentioned forging documents to appear official. Authorities soon arrested Karen on charges including harassment, conspiracy to commit fraud, and intimidation. Maplewood Meadows erupted in relief and a bit of shock. The once fearsome figure was led away in handcuffs, her carefully cultivated composure shattered. Local news aired footage of her protesting her innocence, claiming she was defending the community's values. But the public had seen enough. Civil suits followed. Several pregnant families joined a class action, seeking damages for emotional distress and potential relocation costs. The lawsuit named both Karen personally and the HOA, though the latter swiftly distanced itself, showing proof that Karen acted beyond her authority. Ultimately, the court ordered Karen to pay substantial restitution. Lacking the funds, she faced liens on her property. By the time the dust settled, she lost her home to cover legal fees and damages, forced to vacate the very neighborhood she had once lorded over. In the wake of Karen's downfall, Maplewood Meadows experienced a renaissance of neighborly unity. The newly reorganized HOA board issued a formal statement rescinding Bylaw 17.9, acknowledging its illegality and apologizing for the harm caused. They also revised their entire regulatory process to ensure no single person could manipulate the system so thoroughly again. Families resumed their birth plans without fear. Andrea successfully had her home birth, supported by her midwife, welcoming a healthy baby boy with minimal fuss. No loud sirens, no neighborhood chaos, just the quiet miracle of life, as thousands of homebirthers experience every year. I continued my life in Maplewood Meadows, finally enjoying the peaceful environment I'd wanted in the first place. Neighbors, relieved to be rid of Karen's tyranny, often shared produce from their gardens or invited me for coffee. Many expressed gratitude that I had used my position to stand up for mothers' rights. Still, I never boasted about my victory. I remained humble, emphasizing that my job was simply to uphold the law and protect families' choices. Within a few months, Karen's house went up for auction, seized to satisfy her debts. A young couple bought it, unaware of the drama that preceded them. They quickly repainted and started fresh. The ghost of Karen's reign lingered only in the cautionary tales told around block parties. How an overzealous HOA president once tried to ban home birth and lost everything when she discovered, too late, that the quiet neighbor next door was actually head of the State Midwifery Board. The broader community also took lessons from the ordeal. News coverage praised the mothers who refused to be bullied, highlighting the importance of lawful home birth options and the role of midwives. Donations poured into midwifery advocacy groups. The fiasco ironically gave a larger platform to home birth education, and the county saw an uptick in families exploring midwife-led care. Ultimately, Maplewood Meadows returned to tranquility. The maple leaves turned golden in autumn, drifting lazily along the sidewalks. Children played, new parents wheeled strollers, and the sweet hush of domestic life enveloped the streets. Freed from Karen's clutches, the neighborhood found a renewed sense of togetherness, built on respect for personal rights. As for Karen, her story ended in a swirl of financial ruin, criminal convictions, and public disgrace. She spent time behind bars, and upon release, she was banned from holding any HOA leadership role in the future. Her property, once immaculately manicured, was no longer hers, confiscated to pay restitution. She departed Maplewood Meadows in silence, an unwelcome footnote in the community's history. And so, life moved on. The spark of defiance Karen ignited had turned into a blazing affirmation of birthrights. In the final analysis, no matter how strident or controlling an individual tries to be, the fundamental freedom to choose how and where a baby is born cannot be snuffed out by an overreaching HOA or a Karen who thinks she rules the neighborhood. Compassion, community, and the rule of law prevailed, making Maplewood Meadows a place where families could welcome new life on their own terms, safe from petty tyrants.